This cake came out even better than I expected. I made this cake for my friend's daughter who absolutely loves the Descendants, and of course I had to make it super colorful and super pretty. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I made it. For this cake mix, I'm using a funfetti cake mix to make my cake layers, and I'm using a doctored recipe so that the cakes bake up with a sturdy crumb structure and are super flavorful. You can find the link to my favorite doctored cake mix recipe in the description below, and I prefer to use a cake mix, but of course you can use whatever recipe you prefer. I always give the pans a good tap to allow air bubbles to release and to even out the batter. Once the layers have finished baking and have cooled for about 5 to 10 minutes in the pan, transfer them to a cooling rack to finish the cooling. Wrap each layer securely in plastic wrap and then place them in the freezer until you're ready to decorate. So we are now ready to decorate our Descendants cake. So our cakes are already out of the freezer and I've let them come to room temperature for about 30 minutes. They're not too warm and not frozen solid. The design I'm choosing for this cake is I'm going to roll the entire thing in sprinkles. So the first thing we're going to start with is a bottom cardboard cake round that is 6 inches. And we're also going to put one at the very top of the layer. So this way when we roll it, we can easily handle it on either side. So I've already gone ahead and prepped my frosting. As always, we start off with a dollop of buttercream on our cake board. This helps the cake to stay in place and not slip around while we're decorating. We've got our first layer here. Just make sure that is nice and centered on your cake board as best as you can. When you're filling the cakes with frosting, use about 1/2 cup to a cup of frosting between each layer and then use the offset spatula to spread it evenly before stacking the next layer. After stacking, give the turntable a good spin so that you'll be able to see if you've stacked it straight and adjust it where you need to. And then repeat the same exact process for the next layer. When we get to the top layer, we're going to flip the cake upside down. Not the dome side, but the flat side. This was one of my favorite tips that I learned when I first started. It really helps to create a beautifully flat cake top. So now the cake is stacked and ready for the crumb coat. So here we are using the piping bag. So I'm going to lock in these middle layers. I like to apply the crumb and final coats using a piping bag because it just helps me to apply an even coat. You can certainly use an offset or a straight edge spatula as well if you prefer to do it that way. We are focusing on applying a thin coat for 2 purposes. 1, to trap in any loose crumbs, and 2, to create a clean canvas. So now we're going to take our bench scraper and just smooth out this coat here. Since this is an initial coat, we don't want any areas that are sticking out, like right here, because when we add our next layer of frosting, we don't want it to compromise that final layer. We want it to be nice and smooth. Right, so to finish off our crumb coat, we're just going to clean up the top edge. Just going to take our small offset spatula and gently guide the frosting in towards the center. Just cleaning off your spatula as you go along. And again, this is a crumb coat, so it does not have to be perfect. So now that our crumb coat is done, I'm going to put this in the refrigerator for about 15 to 20 minutes just to make sure all the frosting is nice and firm and we're ready to add the final coat. Okay, so our cake has cooled to the touch, and now we're ready to add our final coat of frosting. I've already gone ahead and added the frosting into a piping bag, and so I chose a darker buttercream because when we add these darker themed sprinkles, it will blend in nicely, so even if there's like a couple holes where the sprinkles don't cover, it won't be so glaring if it would be if we were using a white buttercream. Now to roll the sprinkles, we are going to add another 6-inch cardboard cake round right on top, so that way we can handle the cake easier as we're rolling. Before we do that, I'm going to add this little piece of parchment paper that I did cut out. It tends to help the cardboard lift off easier once we're ready to remove it and put the sprinkles on the top. So I'm just actually going to start at the top, so this way I can lock in that top board. And so when we're done frosting the sides, we're actually not going to chill it yet. We're going to keep it as wet frosting. This way when we roll the sprinkles, they stick perfectly. So we're just going to take our cake scraper and just start evening out that coat. Okay, so I'm happy with how well this frosted. So now is where the fun part happens. So we're gonna pour all of our sprinkles into this cookie sheet, and then we're gonna literally roll our cake. I've got 2 3-ounce bottles of the Bakery Bling Galaxy Glittery Sugar. That's hard to say. We are literally just gonna dump the whole bottle out. And I can already see how perfect this mix is. So I'm gonna lift my cake off of my turntable. Fine if you mess up the bottom at this point. I know it looks perfect, makes me so sad. Okay, we are gonna roll. Here we go. There's no real trick to this part aside from using the 2 cake boards on either sides of the cake. And there's no need to apply pressure. Just gently roll the cake back and forth until you've completely covered the cake in sprinkles. That rolled perfectly. I'm obsessed. I'm gonna very carefully put this in the fridge to set the frosting. We're gonna leave it in there for about 20 to 25 minutes because I want it nice and firm so that it can easily pop off the top. Then we'll finish decorating the top. Now once the cake is chilled enough, run a knife under hot water to heat up the metal and then slice off that top cake board. You can see our parchment paper worked perfectly. Now we can finish off the top, so add some more of the same frosting that we used on the side of the cake. Carefully spread it out to the edge and be careful so that it doesn't hang over the side of the cake where we already applied the sprinkles. Then you can go ahead and pour on the rest of the sprinkles on the top and pour enough so that you can use your fingers just to move it around and make sure you're covering all parts of the top. The entire cake is covered in glittery sugar now, and you can really see how well the darker frosting worked with this mix. To finish the cake, we're going to create a 3-tone swirl on top. And to create this look, we're going to apply 3 colors in a line on top of plastic wrap. For this, you should only need about a 1/4 cup of frosting per color. Roll up the colors into a sausage and then secure and tie one end and cut off the other end. Fit a piping bag with a 1M piping tip and then drop your 3-tone color sausage right into the piping bag. Carefully guide the frosting down towards the end of the tip and then squeeze some out to make sure you're seeing all 3 colors before you start applying it to the cake. Now to start your swirls using a 1M piping tip, start about 1 inch in from the edge of the cake. Remember that you're going to be swinging the frosting around in a circle, so you'll need enough space so that your swirl doesn't fall off. And to keep the swirls as uniform as possible, I like to apply them in a pattern using the clock as a guide, and I do them at a 12, 6, 3, and 9 o'clock pattern. Then I work to fill in from there. Depending on how big I've made my swirls, I can add anywhere from 1 to 2 swirls in between each. The final piece is adding these little Descendants themed cupcake toppers that I found on Amazon, and of course adding some edible glitter spray as well. I hope you enjoyed the video today, and if you make this, please tag me on Instagram at Chris Marie Bakes so I can see it. If you have any ideas of any cakes that you want me to make and show you how to do, comment them below.